Salve, omnes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's on polýMATHY podcast once again. And I have with me today Stefano Vittori, a friend and colleague for decades now, at least 1.5. And he's been just such a fantastic friend and great person to know. And today you get to know him. And one of the coolest things that he and I have been able to work on over the years, which is actually doing songs in Latin. So how are you today, Stefano?
Well. So it's very exciting for me to be here and speaking with you about this fantastic project we undertake
Yeah.
together. Now it's almost a year. No, it's a year. It's a year. It's a year.
Yeah, it's been a year and a few months since we did the first
2019.
song, which was Duque Me, the translation of Scar's. What is it in English? I can't remember the English version of the song anymore.
Be
Be
prepared.
prepared.
Be prepared.
There it is from The Lion King.
It was October 2019.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So,
Mm.
although before Stefano started working with me on these songs, I translated a few on my own, and although I love doing it, Stefano's just so much better at it, and we'll talk about why and why I you know why I think his translations are so worthy of study, actually, which is what he wants to talk about. And he was nice enough to come on today to talk about how he has written these translations, because it's almost like he's writing original poetry, and it's just so cool. So we're going to talk about those today. First, Stefano, yeah, as far as you and me, we started our connection through, I think it was the Text Kit forum, was it not? Where was it?
Uh, you think it was?
Text Kit? Was it Text Kit? Where there was some online forum, or maybe the Grex, years ago, before the internet was as well developed as it is now.
Where
Yeah,
we knew each other.
yeah.
It
How we met,
no,
speaking in Latin.
it was Ile, the forum Ile.
Right, of course. It was the forum
It was
on the old, yeah, the
recording.
Ile, on the YLE, the Finnish news broadcast, which would do in a Latin broadcast.
Yes, it was that beautiful, wonderful place. It's such a pity that it's closed.
Mm,
Audiofonia Finnica,
yeah.
where there was me and some others which you didn't know anything about them. Uh,
Hmm.
Ursinus, Marcus Favonius, Ursin. Do you remember?
I do. Yeah, I do. It was a long time ago. And Stefano, some of our audience is saying that your voice is a little hard to hear. If you're able to maybe get a little closer to the
Yes.
microphone, it should be a little bit better. We'll try that out.
Yeah. It is it better now?
Yeah, I think that'll be good. Let's do that, and hopefully our audience will let us know if it's
I have to
okay.
get a microphone.
We'll get you one.
You know it.
We'll get you one. And so, well, great. So, yeah, well, of course, because you're not, in fact, well, although of course you teach Latin and ancient Greek, your life's work mostly has been in ancient Egyptian, right?
Yes, my specialization, my main studies are about classical Egyptian and hieratic Egyptian. But my first studies in the first years of my life were on Latin and Greek, of course, in high
Hmm.
school. And my first studies in university were about Latin and Greek, lettere classiche, La Sapienza, Roma. So these were my very first studies. And
Mm.
then in the third year, uh, I found this language, which was very fascinating for me, and I decided to learn it, and then to make it my main field of research. But the mind, the brain is focused on Egyptian language, but the heart is focused. My heart is Latin.
Well, you're literally
Mine is Egyptian, but
well, you're
not
literally Latin. You're from the city of Latina, just south of Rome, and Lazio and Latium, the original. So, well, why not? I mean,
ta multa homina in omnibusis rebus.
well, sure, a few million, but still, it's rare than me. And yeah, so Latin, ancient Greek, ancient Egyptian, and of course, obviously, a broad knowledge of many languages. A proposito, by the way, to our various people out there. Now, normally we do polýMATHY podcasts in English predominantly. Sed scimus multos latine loquentes ad esse. We know a lot of Latin speakers are here.
Oh, ottime.
Yeah, but qua propter si cupitis, because of that, if you want, you can even ask questions Latine et possimus etiam respondere Latine. We can answer in Latin if it's easier. O Italiano, o Spagnolo, or what else do we speak? Deutsch,
Oh, Deutsch. I would like
Französisch,
to.
I mean, Français. So we can, we'll be able to read at least your questions. So
I
whatever,
can read, but not
whatever
the
language you want to ask the bid.
Egyptian, of course.
Hellenistiax is in humin erotan,
The
you got
violence.
felete.
The
So
violence.
yeah, and okay, well, so how so oh, by the way, all of you might like to hear a podcast in Latin where Stefano and I spoke for 6 hours about a completely different topic. But of course, Stefano is one of the most impressive Latin speakers I know as well. I'm sorry, I'm going to be complimenting you a lot, so you just have to accept the compliments today, Stefano. Um, so it'll just happen. But
You are
what?
the best Latin speaker I know.
Oh, well, that's that. Well, we know better. No, we didn't. Nah. But one of the things that you and I have in common is we enjoy speaking Latin and reciting Latin, paying attention to phonemic vowel length. But that's not a very common thing. How did you realize the importance of phonemic vowel length when speaking Latin?
Yes. And this has actually to do with what we are doing in these months with these songs, because when I was a boy in high school, the part which I liked most was metric, of course.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, I was already a maniac for metric. So there is this way of reading verses, hexameters, and metric verses in Latin, in Greek, in schools, where the phonemic length is not respected, not even in reading metrics. In school they were content with simply put the stresses in the wrong place, and this was all. So they recited something like arma virunque cano troie qui primus aboris italie fato.
horrible. Horrible. Those are the first lines of the Aeneid for those of you who aren't familiar by Virgil. Hmm.
And this was very painful to my ears, because
Hmm.
I thought, I said to myself, but why? And I didn't know phonemic length, or better said, I did know phonemic length, but just as a stroke on the paper over the letter, and this
Hmm.
was all I knew about phonemic length.
Hmm.
Okay, there are these vowels which are long. Okay, they are long.
Hmm.
Okay, and until we did only prose, Cicero and Caesar and the other prosastic authors, this was not mm, this great problem. And then we began to study. We began to study poetry. So we studied poetry, and they went and they were going on arma virunque canò troie qui primus aboris andra moyenne pemusa polutro ponos malapolla. Okay, but I did study I had studied music in my childhood, and these timings were were not were not seemingly right in my ears, because arma virunque canò, ok, arma virunque canò, but troie, tatan, ta 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 tatan, this was mm, quite, this was very painful to my ears. So I said to myself, it should be arma virunque canò troie. And so the long closed syllable were the very reason because I began to get interested in phonemic vowel length, not the long and the short, the simply long and short syllables, but the closed syllables and those with long vowel, where they were not under the stress. So a student in an Italian school, I don't know elsewhere, in an Italian school, a student recites the dactyl as a dactyl and the spondy as a trochee.
Well, and let's teach people what that means, because that's even
Yes.
with, yeah. Oh,
So,
and to help people, if you're interested, I have a whole playlist about learning how to do this, about understanding what a trochee is, what a spondy is. So you can go ahead and learn this, but let's tell us, Stefano, what a trochee and spondy are.
so basically, classic metric is a kind mm, of music, of speech in music. In this speech in music, you have some units which are called feet. The basic units are mm, quaternary units and ternary units. So feet of three morae, id est feet of three time
Mhm.
units, beats, and feet of four morae, four time units. Um, one foot can have two time units in the first seat, in the first place, and so you can have a strong time and a weak time, a strong beat and a weak beat. So you have ta ta,
Mm.
and this
Uh,
is the trochee. If
Oh,
you have
that's
a
jokey. And I
trochee,
wrote a dactyl. Addita is a one-word example of a dactyl. Addita, long, short, short.
yes, so you have the trochee, which is long short, the
Hmm.
reverse of that, which is short long, and then you have the dactyl, short, long short short. You
Mm.
can reverse it, and you can have an anapest, etc. So in a hexameter, you have six dactyls, of which the sixth one is actually or a spondy, either a spondy or a trochee, because the sixth foot is diminished, which
Hmm.
is why it's called catalectic.
Right.
So, if you have this kind of timing, which is isochronous, ta 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 tam tam, you can have both a dactyl, tam ta ta tam ta ta tam, or you can have a spondy,
Mm.
tam ta tam ta tam. If you don't know phonemic length, you can mistake a spondy for a trochee. So if you focused only on beat, on stress, as they used to do in schools, for you the only parameter is whether a syllable has or has not a stress. So if they are two syllables and it is a dactyl, or if they are mm, one syllable and it's a spondy, for you it makes no difference. And this is and this is what very, very, very mistaken. So um,
Mm.
I'm to answer to answer Luke's question. This was the initial reason because I get involved in phonemic land,
Mm.
because if you pronounce correctly uh, syllable duration in reciting, you have all the timings of the verses perfectly squared.
Right.
So if you pronounce a spondi as a trochee, you have mm, from the music, from the viewpoint of music, the rhythm is broken. Tan
Right.
ta tan ta ta tan ta tan ta ta tan ta ta. This is something it does exist in classical metric. It is called lyrical metric, where you mix different kind of types. You have basically two types of metric: recitative metric and lyrical metric. In
Mm.
recitative metric, you have always the same kind of foot. For example, in a hexameter, you have dactyls or spondys, which is the same kind of foot for more. Um, in an iambic trimeter, you have all iambs. Tatan, 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 tatan. In a septenary or octonary, you have iambs or
Mm.
trochees, tat, 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 tat,
Mm.
tat, 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 tat,
And
tat, etc.
did you say recitative metric and lyric metric? Is this
Mhm.
right? Is this correct, what I wrote?
I didn't listen.
Oh, is this correct?
Recitative metric versus yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Is
In
menandros an example of more lyric metric in Greek? Is he Menandros, the Greek poet, 4th century Greek poet? Is
yes,
he?
this is recitative. Is Menandros,
He's
uh,
also recitative.
Comedies. Aristophanes, olam pronom tu troche la tu lukno.
Ah, okay.
Iambic trimeter. So you write comedies and tragedies in recitative metric when you have the dialogues
Hmm.
among the characters of the work. In the choral parts, you have lyric metrics, and this arose with lyric poetry, with Sappho and Alceus and these authors, and you can immediately see the difference between these two kinds of metrics, because you can see that in a verse which is the suffix minor, for example, you have trochee, trochee, and dactyl, and trochee, and trochee. So
Hmm.
you have not anymore an isochronous beat.
Hmm.
Tam, ta tam, tam, ta, ta ta tam, ta tam, tam. It's not
Hmm.
anymore ta, ta ta ta, ta ta ta, isochronous beat.
Mm-hmm.
The beat becomes anisochronous, so that Cicero, in a work of his, says that when he hears lyrical poetry recited without the instruments, the music accompanying it, it seems to him like prose,
Mm.
because it's not anymore predictable, the following beat, the next beat, where it will be. It's not predictable.
Hmm.
So this is very interesting. So you can actually have um, an anisochronous beat in metrics, but it's not in a hexameter. You will have it for example, in lyrical metrics. For example, you have the Asclepiadeus Major, the very famous poem of Horace. Tu ne que sieris, quire nefas, quem mi, quem tibi finen di dederint leuconoe.
Mm-hmm.
This
Mm-hmm.
is typical of some musical traditions where the beat is not isochronous, and the Balkans, which is the very region where Greeks live. A dear friend of mine, musicologist, told me that this fact that in ancient metric, in very ancient Greek metric, the beat is not isochronous. It's not strange at all
Hmm.
to his eyes, because in the Balkanic region, the popular musical traditions do exist where the beat is not isochronous
Hmm.
till now. And if you take a look to Horace, to all of Horace works in the lyrical field, you can listen this
Hmm.
difference between what you could hear in Horace Satyre, or in Virgil, or in Lucretius,
Hmm.
and what you will hear in Catullus, in Martialis, in um, in Horace himself.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Remarkable.
So
Well, that's
this is
great. And I
where
wrote an
my
ex
interest. So this
Prego.
is where my interest in phonemic length began. Not in phonetics, not in historical phonetics, which is a field in which I obviously am interested, but in music,
Mm.
in poetry, in poetry. It was
Right.
necessary to learn this, to taste, to truly taste poetry.
Mm. That's right. And I feel the same way. I have a little newsletter I send out most weeks. And last week I wrote one, which you can find if you want on lucranieri.com, where I talked about this exact issue. Because with the ancient languages, both Greek and Latin, their phonologies are changing. And you and I have discussed in great detail over the years how fascinating those changes are. But the constants that is true throughout, even throughout, after Latin, as we understand it, becomes a dead language, it's still people are writing poetry with perfect precision in these meters, all the way through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Although there are very famous works like the Carmina Burana, people should know that those are drinking songs. Those aren't really like high art. And you can make them high art with the music of Karl Orff, but they're not, the poetry is not. I mean, I would dare say, Stefano, that your compositions are just, except they're not as famous as the Carmina Burana. They're just better Latin poetry because of how much more skill you're putting into them comparatively. And I don't hope people don't mind me saying so. But we're going to talk about today exactly why that is, and because those meters are just simple stress-based ones, and they're great. I love them. I've sung one on Scorpio Martianus. By the way, those of you who don't know about my other YouTube channel, Scorpio
You
Martianus, that's where
sang,
these Latin
you
songs
sang
go.
one of those.
Hmm.
You sang one of those
I
songs
did.
with that famous American
Yankee
band.
Doodle, yeah. Unique
The famous
proprium,
song.
yeah, da natura donum. Yeah, and that's the only way you can really um, interact
Perfect.
with a song like that. I think. Oh, it was fun. Yeah, and I really enjoyed it. And of course, we're not going to talk about Hellfire today too much, but Hellfire, of course, you also put in a stress-based meter. But I still think
In that case,
that one is.
it was necessary.
I think it's so much better than the Carmina Burana for the most part. But we'll talk about that. And I put up an example here of recta, which is a trochee, versus canta, which is a spondee. And that difference is as critical as any difference. And this is generally still not taught. And in that newsletter I was telling you and telling everyone out there about, this is what I think is so important because like you and you tend to prefer speaking ecclesiastical pronunciation of Latin, but you're always observing the vowel quantities when you speak. You can't help from doing so because you've learned the language in that way, so that so then whether that being historically accurate or not is not really the point because that's not the most important part of the literature. We get access to the poetry by means of knowing phonemic vowel length, and that's why I think it should be taught. Whereas people get worried about, oh, it's Kana instead of Chana. It's like, well, sure, but when did it stop becoming Kana? When was it Kana? There's all sorts of interesting variations that happen along the way, but that phonemic vowel length is the critical feature. So, do you want to talk about Duque Me?
Oh, Duque Me.
I have it here. It's okay.
This is a sweet memory. The very first song, Velino Generesco da Metri. I do like classical pronunciation anyway.
Mhm.
And, and also ecclesiastical. So Latin language is so beautiful that both kind of pronunciation are very beautiful in their own. I wouldn't I wouldn't avoid to use one for another. You know, when we talk in Latin, I always or almost always with you I use the classical pronunciation, and sometimes also the ecclesiastical. They are beautiful. So to come back to our song, uh, where it where it is, I
Oh,
don't.
I'm sorry. I'll put it back up. Also, our friend Marina Musa Pedestris, whose channel you should subscribe to, by the way. This is a wonderful channel where she also recites poetry, and she has the same passion that Stefano and I do for this. And she says, "Que kinitota carne burana con
Attenzione,
coro."
Eneas Migliores, non né
Well,
contento, né contento.
sie denkt, dass du besser ist. Bist. Wait, I can't speak German. I forgot German. Sorry, German speakers. But she thinks that she agrees with me that your translations are better Latin poetry than the Carmina Burana. Good. I'm glad we agree.
But the author says he can. But the author says he can win Ovid himself. Uh, Nasonem post calicem carmine preibo.
It's
Sì, nasonem
it's
pei,
funny.
ego qui preo eum. No, 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 I don't accept it.
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't say you're better than Virgil, but he says so that well actually you're right. If he's better than Virgil, then you're better you're better than him.
No, no.
No, I'm just kidding.
My
Tell us about Tukime.
Ovid, my I don't know. It's my God. I don't know. Well, Duque Me. This the first thing in this song, which catched my attention, and it was a day. Well, I have classes. I teach in schools, and in the beginning of the year, they tell you, we didn't give you yet classes, and you don't have classes now, so go and go in that room, in that classroom, and check them, so that they may don't kill one another, and something like that. So
Hmm.
are you're a substitute for a professor who is absent in that moment, so you don't have anything to do, and you are seated on on your chair, and the students chat with one another, and you what what could you do to make this time pass? So I had this song in my mind, scarce song, and I began to translate it into Latin.
It's amazing.
And then I went out from that classroom, and I went to the room, to the hall of the professors, to wait for my next hour
Mm.
in that which was my very classroom with my real students, and so I went on translating, and then I sent it to you, and I sent it to Luke, and he was so I was so honored by the for the comments he made. He was very generous from the very first moment. When I do you remember when I sent it to you, this text?
It was
Uh,
amazing. I was
you
floored because you'd accomplished the same kind of thing I've wanted to do with translations I've done in songs. With you simply because I haven't made my career literature the way you have, so I simply am not as familiar or intimately familiar. I don't remember all the things I've read as well as you have because you've read them so many times and been teaching them for years. So for you to be able to because I really liked it. And I have a little joke that I say to Stefano because he and I both love the movie Amadeus from 1984. And I like this because I think it works well. I feel a little bit like Salieri, who was in that movie, and this is not exactly historically true, but Salieri in the movie, he is depicted as being a competent composer, but not nearly as good as Mozart, and so he's envious. Whereas I'm not at all envious of Stefano, and I love him to death.
What are you saying? Your basia is very, very beautiful. Your
Thank
basia.
you. It was,
But
but I mean, I'm glad. It probably has too many notes in it. Just kidding. But what I wanted to say was, the character of Salieri is depicted as being basically the only person who can recognize, one of the few people can really recognize the genius of it. So I was so pleased that I could, and I'm not the only one, because we have a nice big audience here today of people who really admire your translations. So I wasn't the only one to admire them, but I really felt like that. Like, wow. He's this wonderful friend of mine is able to do even better something that I was trying to do, and that's because of how well you understand meter, metrics in general when it comes to poetry. I understand it well enough to really appreciate it, but constructing it at this level is still a little advanced for my ability. But yeah, in the beginning here, by the way, for those of you who aren't familiar, this is. Oh, go ahead, Stefano. Scusa.
no, I was about to speak about the song, the me.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this is "Be Prepared" from The Lion King. This is um, the most amazing song in the movie. It should not have been cut from the live action version, which was
No,
ridiculous. But it's like, I guess that guy couldn't sing. I don't know. But the English, on not in the movie, but in the CD or the album, there is a beginning part where Jeremy Irons says the lines, "I never thought hyenas essential. They're crude and unspeakably plain, but maybe they've a glimmer of potential, if allied to my vision and brain." And then the song starts, which says, "I know that your powers of retention are as wet as a warthog's backside." And that's where the song begins in the movie. But that first part is this first strophe here, this first stanza that you translated, right?
yes, uh, this so this song. So it's the character, it's Car's character, which is so beautiful. Um, and the first strophe, which it's not present in the some versions you can find. It's so useful and beautiful to understand Scar's character, which is that of a dictator, of a tribunus. Well, in hoc generis codametur. Well, this conjunction, I love this conjunction so much. Well, well in hoc generis codametur, which is not simply also, which is not, it's not simply to. Here, Scar is like a generous king who, well in hoc generis codametur. You too, even you, can be something useful for me. Miserabiliter stolido. So, Scar. So this is what I basically do when I translate a song. In primis, the rhythm. I someone who is in among the listeners now, she knows I very love the Anapest, which is they said in late imperial times the feminine counterpart of the dactyl,
Mm,
because it's
yeah,
the reverse dactyl.
yeah.
Uh, so it's the anti-hero verse of
Ah, interesting. So, and just to, because I know there are listeners out there who don't fully understand this yet, I want to give an example. So, so dactyl is long, short, short, bum, ba, bum. Whereas an anapest is short, short, long. So, bum. So, vele no rest coda metur, right? Mm,
So the dactyl tam ta ta tam ta ta tam is the heroic verse, the verse
mm,
of heroes.
mm,
The anapest, so is the contrary of the dactyl, so is the anti-hero, is like perfect
Mm.
to be
Wow.
the foot, the metric foot of the villain.
Wow.
Uh,
Genius.
so
See,
the
people, I
song,
wouldn't have thought of that.
yes, exactly.
Stefano did.
Actually, I'm thinking of it just right now. But I listened to the song. I listened to the song, and I heard it was in Anapests. Well, could you sing it to me
Mm,
in English?
sure.
Because there is a little difference between the
Absolutely.
Latin text and the English text
Mm,
from the metric viewpoint.
absolutely. I'll do it as well as I remember Jeremy Irons doing it, which was I know that your powers of retention are as wet as a warthog's backside, but thick as you are, pay attention. My words are a matter of pride. Pergo?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm.
in the English text, the first anapest can be replaced by a spondist, by a spondy. I know that your power of retention. I don't do that. Retinenti a quantula che they are all anapests, but the rhythm is very very moraic. Um, this is something which is easier in modern music. This is something interesting. It's easier to translate into Latin modern English American music than old English American music or Italian music or
Mm.
modern Italian or Spanish music, music which is sung in syllabic languages, in isosyllabic
And
languages.
usually iambic for traditional songs, right?
Mhm.
Especially English. Is it more iambic in traditional
Yes,
English language songs?
yes. English, maxima ex parte nostra constatoratio, iambis.
Right.
So
Yeah.
also, this is Cicero. My and our language is mostly made up of ions.
Mm-hmm.
So English, of course, is not a Moraic language, but English music and rock, basically, it's very Moraic. In other terms, you can easily, very easily, individuate the short and the long syllable in an English song. It's very easy. It's not so easy in English, in Spanish. It's not so easy in Italian. And our friend um, does know it when we translated. Well, Christopher, he translate with my help some Spanish song, and it was very difficult to understand the short and the long syllable. So this song was clearly in Anapests. So the first thing I do is to individuate the foot, not the meter, because the meter is impossible to find in a modern song. You don't have hexameters, you don't have iambic trimeters, you don't have stuff like that in modern songs. I know that someone. No, I'm reading the. Well, yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. They are two anapests. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm saying you have this to individuate the feet, not the meter, the feet, and then to fill them with the Latin words. But most importantly, after you have found the rhythm, the right rhythm, most importantly, you have to understand the the character, the indoles personae,
Mm.
the, because this will give you the words, the style, the kind of Latin the character will speak. Scar is, for example, very. It's an educated. It's a well-educated lion. In the beautiful, beautiful German version of this song, Scar says, "Ich red nicht nur Löwenlatein." I
I
don't
I
speak
won't speak in
only
Lion Latin
Lion's
anymore.
Latin. Lion's Latin. I don't speak only Lion's Latin. S- So, and
That's
I
in
didn't,
Is that
and
a
I
German
didn't know this
expression?
version when I wrote this.
Wow, is that a German expression?
Yeah, Scar
Marina,
says,
sagt man das auf Deutsch? Löwische Latein? Löwe-Latein?
I don't remember the exact verses, but in the beginning, he says, "Ich red nicht nur Löwenlatein.
Wow.
Ähm, ich, ich weiß die Beschränkenheit der jenen, ähm, and then I don't remember, blah 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 blah. Ist nicht nur Löwenlatein."
Yes,
Um,
Marina
so
says that she's never heard of a Löwenlatein, but
so he's very well educated,
mm,
and he also is kind of archaic in his language. So you have to also to get a look to the English, to the kind of English spoken by the original character. So by reading the original text, I see a very elegant form of English, which is not outdated, but simply very high.
mm,
Um, so there are some words which are typical of in this Latin text. There are some words which are typical of a certain kind of Latin, which is the Latin used by Lucretius, which are, for example, retinentia, et quantula, et
mhm.
ps decidua, and
Yes. Oh,
edendi.
my favorite thing.
Yes, I love it so much, and I love Lucretius so much.
Oops,
So,
oops. Hang on. Yeah, let's talk
retinentia.
about the phonetical and
Yes,
so this is where it's represented. And Stefano and I have had a lot of enjoyable conversations discussing this exact phenomenon, which is essentially it's very similar to a dropped S, which occurs in many dialects of Spanish. For example, and one I'm familiar with, among others, would be say the way Cubans tend to speak, but not just Cubans. Or you hear it from Venezuelans, like the syllable final S. Especially at the end of a word, at least in Latin, seems to be very characteristic of it, where while we don't know exactly how it might have sounded, for example, this word, habentibus, normally with an S, is maybe it became an H sound, like habentibuh. So you have a sh, and then it's debuccalized, so it goes out from the mouth, out of the bocca, and then just becomes a ha, habentibuh, and then maybe it's dropped entirely to a habentibu.
yes,
And that's it's something that Cicero talks about, if I'm not mistaken, as being something that the best orators, when he was young, would always do, right?
yes.
Yeah.
But yes, this because it's a phenomenon you can see in the beginning of the first century before Christ. I think in
Hmm.
Lucretius you can see it. In Catullus you cannot see it anymore.
Mm,
So it's something which disappears more or less in that time.
mm,
As for retinentia, in Lucretius is this is the ability of the mind to remember what happens in the past.
mm,
So in the original English text, Scar scolds the hyenas because they are incapable of focusing. And it's beautiful that the English text uses this word retention, which is so reminding of Lucrece retinentia.
Yeah, it is.
As for what, and then he mix up also Greek words like dogmata, logos. These are all instruments to highlight his well-educated status in a
Mm.
society of the first century before Christ. A first
Oh,
century before
and
Christ would have used very a lot of Greek terms like this,
mm,
especially in the intellectual field, like dogmata, logos.
as we
Um,
still do in Italian and English for sure. And also, it's I know you did not intend it, but in English also, of course, the hyenas look kind of like dogs. So when the first time I read it and was singing it, that's secondary. I know that wasn't intended probably, but the fact that they are Greek words, the logos, and not even logos, but in fact logos, making it yet Greeker, right? It's even more
yes,
Greek
of
this way.
course, like Cicero when he uses Greek words in his text, often he writes them directly in Greek without any without
Yeah, not transliterated.
to the to the
Yeah.
Latin form. Uh, as for as for the authors behind this version, so we have Lucretius, and also, of course, and this is something the people listening to the song got, and I'm very happy of this. Virgil, um,
Yes.
with
Well, and
that
that's the part that
Redeunt
stood out to me.
Saturnia regna.
I have when I recorded my audiobook of the Eclogue. Of course, I knew the fourth eclogue before I knew your translation, but once I went to actually sit down and really learn the all 10 eclogae and recite them for my audiobook, I realized that it felt so much more. This is the exact effect. The effect of this song, the fact that I had heard it so many times, the Latin translation. Of course, I performed it, but I had to sing it many, many times to get it right. So I went these redeunt Saturnia regna oriturno a progenies. So because I had to sing that so many times to make it sound the way I wanted to, it became fixed in my mind. And many people out there who have heard that song in Latin now have probably had those lines fixed in them as well, as much as the cartoon when we were children. So when I
Very,
recited the fourth
very right.
eclogue, it felt so natural for me to read that and in fact I wanted to look at it, the fourth eclogue, because it's right here, just to prove everybody we're not making this up. Yam Noah, there we go. So Yam Noah progenie skylo demititur alto, and immediately before that, redeunt Saturnia regna, verbatim, taken right from it, which is such a nice thing. And I think pedagogically and educationally, why your translations bring such value to our community of classicists and of Latin learners and speakers is because
But well,
your translations bring us closer to appreciating these originals.
yes. So in poetry, the other poets, oh my God, the other poets. Of course, the poets, the ancient poets, the true poets.
Oh, you're a poet. Come on, you can
So
be
no, I'm
you're the
not.
poet
So
of the day.
let's
Poeta del giorno, dai.
no, let's put it like that. It's a poet is one who uses metric and speaks and says stuff in metric. So in poetry, the other ones who used rhythm and metrics before you make a lexicon for you in which you can express things with oh, it's like a meme. It's like a meme.
Yes,
Uh,
the
verse,
the the,
a
the
verse of a
ancient
poem.
meaning of yeah, the because we use meme today to mean something a little different. By the way, thank you, Chris. Subscribe to Pedagogical, by the way. He's saying that such
Okay.
songs, such translations as your songs, make the human letters they stand out, and I really agree with that. But oh gosh, I was saying something else I wanted to say.
Yes.
I forgot. Excuse me.
So
What did I say?
the ancient poets are like the
Meme.
text of ancient poets are like memes with
Right.
which you can express things different from those expressed by them, but with the same image. So in this case, Scar is actually saying what Virgil says in that egloga about himself. Scar is saying it about himself, of course. Uh, and the cool fact is that dactyl is so close to the anapest that you can use things written in dactyl into an apestic meter,
Mm.
just by inserting some different words like auditor. But what does Carr say in this point?
He says, be prepared for the chance of a lifetime. Be prepared for sensational news.
Sensation in yes, which is what in Italian says, il mio sogno si sta realizzando, è la cosa che bramo di più. But what
Mm.
does he wish for? What is this wish of his? Is the Radion Saturnia Regna and the Nova Progenies. And then there was this first syllable in Progenies, and I thought this will be the very syllable which will be so lengthened if I put it like that. And you understood perfectly what I wanted because
Oh, yeah.
you sing it the way in this crazy way, which is also in the original song. So, uh, so when you have to choose the words, you have also to know the one who is going to sing them.
Mm.
I thought about you from the very first
Oh,
verse I
thanks.
wrote. So I wrote this translation and thought this will be sung by Luke and no
Mm.
one else. And because I had seen you singing Basia and Duc Me ad Lunam and the other songs and the other songs in Scorpio Martianus, and there was this thing which struck me, which is this ability, this skill of yours to make verses live.
Mm.
You
Thanks.
can understand the word medullitus.
Well,
I
yeah.
don't know how to say
Yeah.
that in
Well,
English.
let's teach everybody a Latin word today because it's a great word, medullitus. Tell us, what is the medulla in Italiano, poi in inglese?
Midolla, nelle midolle, you can understand the soul of not of
Yeah.
a text, not of a text, but of a single word, and from the medulla of a
The
single
kernel,
word.
which we think of in English, we think of medulla as the medulla oblongata, which is the core of the brain, the kernel or center, and
Yes,
medulla is the inside part of something. So medullitus is an
yes,
adverb meaning
inside part of a
to the
bone,
center.
the inside part of the bone,
Right. I'm sorry. The marrow. Marrow, I think,
tender
is
one.
medulla. Yeah, the
Hmm?
medulla. Marrow, bone marrow.
Yeah, yes,
Hmm.
the tender one, the tender part, the tender
Yeah.
inside part of the bone. So you know how to make these words live. So you have to think about which word are you going to put in that point of the verse, basing on rhythm, basing on the one who will sing it, estossum, yes. Um, so basing on rhythm, basing on the kind of person who will sing, and also on the style of the character singing this song.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
thank you. Well,
I
I'd like I accept your compliment graciously, but I want to defer it into saying that the only reason I can understand this kind of intent in your translations and your really poetic composition. This is not plain translation. It's quite original. And this is why I regard it as poetry in its own right.
Yes,
But Because I speak Latin and you speak Latin, which is why you're able to make perfect, excuse me, perfect. Let's say incredibly fantastic translations. I think they're perfect. They couldn't be better in that sense, and is what I mean. You make these great translations because you speak Latin, and I can perform them usually with the right feeling on the words because I also speak Latin. So, and I think because you and I are we want to be generous to other people who have made translations and performed them on YouTube, for example. And some are very good. Others are not. Others are terrible. That they clearly don't understand Latin literature. They can't speak Latin. It's not the only pronunciation factor which matters is the syllable length, and that's not even considered. And if, like in Hellfire, where syllable length isn't important to the meter, the stresses are. But then they're not even doing that right. So there's really nothing about them which is of any value except brief entertainment, which is a shame because I think the power of this activity that you're modeling for so many people is to really bring people closer to real understanding of the Latin language and literature.
Yes, also when you translate, so there is this very well spread error. Some people, I hear other translations on the internet into Latin, and they simply think, well, I have to translate a song into Latin, so I take the text of the song and then I take the vocabulary and then I translate it into Latin. Okay, but well, no. So
Yeah,
you have a rhythm,
no.
rhyme. You have so it's it's uh, it's a work which is also a play. It's not simply translating. I also read some comments under our videos. This is not what the text says. Yes, of course it is.
Oh, so we can ignore those. Yeah,
No.
well, that which is a good reason because there's someone who precedes us in this activity. Her name's Olive, and she goes by Olivette on YouTube. She hasn't made videos for years, but she did a few, and I liked her translations. But she also is, I don't know if she's a teacher, but like a teacher, she also would add the English translation of her Latin, and people kept complaining in the comments that that's not the original English lyrics, which is why you and I decided not to put any English translations in
Oh,
on the video,
this
but
is
we put
something
it
you
in the
explained to me
description.
because I wanted. Well, but
Yeah.
let's put a disclaimer. Let's put a disclaimer. It's not what the say. It's not precisely what the song
No,
says.
we just got to leave,
Don't
there's
don't do such.
you and I are both teachers. We want to include everybody, but some people you just got to leave at the bus stop and drive on. But speaking of driving on, well, hey, what's this mean? Who is this?
Huh?
Libiti and I.
Libitina. Libitina is the hereafter. Palus
Mm,
Libitina
mm-hmm,
is the Stygia Palus. Is the marshland of the Styx,
mm,
the lake of the hereafter.
mm-hmm.
So even if even if the empty darkness of the hereafter.
Which is in the vacant eyes of these hyenas, especially
The English text,
what's it?
what does it say? What does it say?
Let me find it. This is for shining successions. It's clear from your vacant expressions, the lights are not all on upstairs.
Yes,
Yeah.
our Latin scar is a little more literary, and and he says that the darkness of the hereafter is dominant in their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And it's with the hyena with his eyes like that, where he's not even, he's just like,
yes, yes.
and yeah, he's doing his little salute with his adorable paw. He's like this with his thumb like that, and it's so funny because of course it works perfectly with the video, which makes sense that the timing, which which is ideal, that the video and the words make sense. But I don't know, it's even better, especially Wakuai Tenebrai, and Tenebrai is very common in poetry, so That's a good word for us to know. And nekopinus. I mean, so much of this is really conversational Latin as well, which so is the original English song. There's some that is poetic and conversational elements in the English. So
Even more.
nekopinus, unexpected. You know, it's a very important word to know. So this is really helpful.
Yes, Necopinus Necopinus has this double value in Latin,
Mm-hmm.
which is is double from the viewpoint of the diathesis. So Necopinus is someone who doesn't expect, or something which is not expected. So in
Mm-hmm.
this case, of course, it's someone.
Irene says how when you talk
Yes,
about translation, you always think of
yes,
something
it's
that's
not translation, which is not.
erroneously from the literal. Yeah, yeah, it's a good
So
point.
you basically, I always propose this example to my students. When my students ask me how have I to translate this word, these 3 or 4 words, how have I to translate them, as if there were uh, mm, uh, um, a biunivocal relationship between a word and another in a language A and in a language B. So I propose to them this example. Would you translate I make my eyes up into Italian word by word? Mi faccio gli occhi su.
Mm-hmm.
O which in Italian would mean I make my eyes up. So I
Mm-hmm.
put my eyes and I don't know, I put them up something on something. It will be senseless. In poetry, it's not the single word which makes sense, which is the reason why it's senseless to translate word by word poetry. Because in a prosastic text, a word can have a meaning of its own. But in a poetic text, this doesn't happen. Simply, this doesn't happen. In a
Mm-hmm.
poetic text, it's not the simple single word which makes sense per se, autonomously. It's the phrasing, it's the
Mm-hmm.
timing, it's the position into the text. So this is the reason. Basically, this is the reason why you can't translate a poetry word by word or literally, and this reason is that unlike prose, unlike prose, the very meaning of the poetry of a poem is not in his words or in the ensemble of his words and then in its sentences.
Mm-hmm.
The real meaning is in the whole in the whole text and in the sensations this
Mm.
text
And the
makes.
structure, yeah, the structure, which guides
So
it, the
yes,
rhythm, the
so
meter. It's so important because if it were possible to write the poem in prose and have the same meaning, it would be in prose. Right? And then it wouldn't need to be a poem. It's a poem because the meter is doing something. And I in the newsletter I was saying before about I showed 2 songs from a TV show I like, and it's actually the same chord progression in both, but the rhythm is totally different, so they have completely different feelings. Just as if this weren't an anapest, if it were in dactyl, it would feel very different. I'm trying, can't think of an example, but it's such a huge part of this. And Stefan, I wonder if you want to help me answer this gentleman's questions. Charles Quinn asks, I have been delving into songwriting, and I wanted to write a song in Latin. You know, the best type to use. So, Charles, first question I have for you is, so we strongly recommend both of us writing with a good sense of meter. And the way to get a good sense of meter is to understand Latin, to be able to recite Latin with good attention to the syllable lengths. And if that's something that you're not familiar with, that's fine. I actually have a playlist of about 20 videos where I teach you how to get to do that. So if I would start there just to understand how the most basic syllable lengths of Latin work, because if you don't know that, your name, Charles Quinn, it looks like an English language name, so you might be from an Anglo-Saxon country like myself, in which case English doesn't have this feature. Is it a completely new dimension of language and rhythmical structure. And if you're only familiar with English language poetry or songs, you can't get that sound out of Latin with that kind of sense of rhythm. So that'd be my first question. And also, how well do you know Latin? Because you want to understand the way that Latin literature and rhythms are utilized. But let's see if you have a follow up for us, Charles.
And
Mhm.
another thing
Prego.
which is truly necessary to write into Latin verses into Latin is to read a lot, a lot, a lot of Roman authors,
Read a
of,
lot. Yeah.
of Roman poets, but
Hmm.
but really, really, really a lot.
Yeah.
Juvenal, Virgil, Ovid, a lot of
Yeah.
Ovid. Ovid, as if in Italy we say as if it were raining. Uh,
Che si dice in italiano?
come se piovesse.
Come se piovesse.
Ovidio, devi leggere Ovidio come se piovesse. No, you have to do so and so as if it were raining.
Hmm.
So it's as if the thing you have to do were raining from the sky. So you have to read books as if they
Yeah.
were raining. You
Right.
have to read Ovid as if he as if his verses were raining.
Right. And then
And
also to understand the rhythms in them, because because I hate to express a feeling of it's not really criticism, it's a disappointment in the pedagogical system of, say, Italy or the United States and most other countries about Latin, because you and I believe that the most important part about the language is that natural rhythm, which then becomes expressed as the rhythm in the poetry. And but unfortunately, that's taught as it is taught in Italy and in most other places in a way that's just not how the language works. So they think it's stress based, like arma virumque cano, and it sounds terrible. And
exactly,
so
exactly.
and so what you'll need, Charles, too, is not to be able to read a lot of them with the right meter. As for Ovid, I've recorded a few hours worth of Ovid's poetry years ago on my other channel, Scorpio Martianus. And also, Charles, I would recommend this. There's a Discord channel that I have, which is linked in the description of the video, and you can join it. And in it, there is in my Discord server, there's a channel for recitation workshop, or other people like you want to do exactly that, and they want to, you know. So here's the thing, Charles. I think you'd probably want to know how to recite Latin poetry in the intended way. I won't say correctly, because you could do all kinds of things, but in a way where the rhythm is apparent, which is the intended way. And there's many ways you can realize that. But once you get there, then you can start to recite Latin poetry, like Stefano was saying, read, read, read. But I'm saying if you don't read it with the right rhythm, you'll be getting content, you'll be getting meaning, but you won't be getting the music of it. So I'd say come join us there, and we'd love to guide you. And um, yeah, there we go. Wanted to, well, I want to ask you, Stefano, about, let's see, we saw this. This is so good, especially because they're short lines, and Latin words are long, a lot of them. And so to be appropriately concise, to convey meaning, I find very challenging, but you do it with such facility, like here. Oops, scusa. Go ahead though, if you would. So sperate futurum bis. So yeah, sperate futurum bis non rediturum. I messed up the macron in the.
Ah, I
I'm so
remember.
sorry. You were so unhappy when I did that. I put a long mark, everyone, in the video. It's wrong. It's wrong. I did this. Oh my gosh.
I remember it.
It's even worse. It's terribly wrong. So forgive me, everyone, for that. But
Yes, in some cases, it's a little bit uncomfortable to translate into Latin, which has long words, English verses, which have short words. But this uncomfortability is actually is actually not real. Not real because it's true. English uses a lot of words, a lot of uses short words, but they are a lot. While Latin, yes, it uses long words, but they are very few. You can convey a very big deal of meaning in few Latin words.
Mm,
So, mm, yes, it can be tricky sometimes. But if you think as a Latin speaker and not as a vulgar speaker who is using Latin to translate a song into that language, you manage to think that same meaning in the way a Latin speaker would have
mhm.
said it.
The idiom comes to you spontaneously, just as if, since I
Yes, it
speak
comes from
Italian,
there.
I'm not going to. It's kind of odd. It's like, can you imagine someone who doesn't speak Italian trying to translate a song into Italian? It seems a kind of strange, and I don't want to discourage people from trying because they should, and it's fun and it's valuable, and you learn to speak better and you learn to read better by doing the exercise, even if you're not at that advanced level yet. So people should try and experiment, but I think it's also a little bit of, have you heard, Stefano, of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
No.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is a study which shows that people's confidence level about a skill varies through their training. So when they first start, so like say people who are learning Latin, if people first start to learn Latin, they realize, oh, I don't know anything. And then it gets higher and higher. And depending what they're using, maybe some traditional textbook, think, oh, I know more and more. And they get to this, they get to that a really high confidence point, and they think they have it all figured out. And it's not just Latin, it could be flying an airplane, it could be anything. But then after that, their confidence level goes very far down, and they realize that, oh no, there's so much more I didn't understand yet. But a lot of people don't get that far. So they're still in this part of the curve. And and I guess I'm saying this to very gently critique the bad translations of Latin songs that are out there, because people think they have it figured out. But if they really knew how much they need to know, they wouldn't ever have published such a thing, because they realize that it's almost gibberish. And that's a shame, because like I remember seeing some of them and being like, I can't even understand this, because it's not, like you were saying, in good Latin idiom, and that requires, as you're saying, read again. Um,
So,
yeah.
yes, and this is due to a simple, would you do a version of Under the Sea in ancient Greek?
If you, I'd love to help. If I can, I mean, your ancient Greek is better than mine, but I love ancient Greek, so I'm super into that idea. Uh, yeah.
Ancient Greek, not my. I know that language. I know that language. I love that language, but it's not my language. My language is Latin.
Fair enough. Fair
So,
enough. You were saying,
uh,
excuse me, I
so
interrupted
yes,
you.
yes. I can. There is a song. There is a song which is which I and Luke are about to publish. I hope.
Oh, and this person, ciao, by the way.
She's explaining the Dunning.
In Italian. This is for our. You keep talking, Stefano. I'll leave this up for the Italiani.
So the Greek, so Greek language, I can use Greek language, and it's very beautiful. But and in this thing, I reconnect myself to what you said. Why reading the authors? Language is not only grammar and vocabulary, which is what scholastic grammars make you think. No, language is pragmatic. Language is not only grammar rules and vocabulary, but it's in a giant part of it, a gigantic part of it is pragmatic. So you have to know not how would you say, I don't know, bed, window, and house in Latin or Greek or Sanskrit or whatever. You have to learn how to feel in Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit, etc.
Well, how do we do that?
You have to learn to feel in that language,
Come?
not
How
think.
do we do it? Quomodo, quopacto. How do we do it?
Excuse me?
Like how can we feel in Latin? Because that's the
Read,
goal. And I agree. The goal to translate a song well or to write anything well in Latin is to feel in Latin. But how?
yes,
How can you
reading,
get there?
reading. Uh, you buy, you no, you buy. We have the internet. I was a boy, and internet was not such a thing, and almost at least in Italy. But you now have the net, have the internet. So go to Latin library or free Latin text
Yeah.
and take all Ovid, all Catullus, all Martial, all Virgil, and read. So you um, learn the grammar and the vocabulary in order to just simply understand what he says. But then it is the first brick. It is the first brick. It's necessary, but it's the first brick. The first brick. Then you have when you have the instrument, which is you have your piano. You then have to learn how to play that piano, and you have to play in order to play.
Mm.
But playing is to hear, is to
Yeah.
hear, and then you sing. But before you have to hear, you have to
Mm.
hear what the author said, because they felt in Latin. They spoke, of course, in Latin, but you can speak in Latin if you learn a good grammar. You can say in Latin, well, open the window, let's go out, or you can say that stuff in Latin if you mm, if you learn from a good grammar. But if you want to write and truly speak in Latin and 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 write poems or verses or song translations, whatever you want, in true Latin, you have to speak with those who used to speak and think and feel Latin. And these people who were the authors,
Yeah.
all
Like
people
Erasmus.
from the ancient ones to Apuleius. That's not. I'm not a fan of the classicists. So only Ovid, only Virgil. No, I am. My favorite poets are Ovid and well, he is a classic, but Lucretius and Catullus,
Hmm.
who are archaic, and I love archaic poets so much.
Mm.
Uh, but so if you speak with them, if you read them, you will end up by speaking with them. What I
Hmm.
mean by
Well,
this,
that's what Erasmus said. He said
mhm.
I think he told it was think I believe he told Thomas More, but he wrote that my friends are Cicero and who else did he mention? And Ovid, and because he would read them as and
No,
it's a one-way communication. It's almost like doing a video on YouTube. It's more one way than it is two-way, but it is communicating and
I
you.
don't think it's well. Perhaps yes, of course, it's a one-way communication, but so it can happen to you, and it happened to me, that you are reading Lucretius, and you are following his reasoning, and you at a certain point make an objection, and in the very next line he says, uh, if you perhaps are making this objection that so and so, and he's replying to you. So is this one directional communication? I don't think so, because you are beginning to think like him.
Mm.
This is because you begin to make the objections, and he foresees, to make the thoughts he thinks, and then you speak his language in a you truly speak his language. You are not
Mm.
a grammar, a book of grammar.
Right.
You are a Roman speaker at the end.
Absolutely.
You're a
Yeah.
Roman speaker at the end.
And Irene also added that, yeah, you need to know the content. It's necessary to know the author, the context. I'm sure we agree, and that's sort of part of it, because what I am very tentative to discourage people in some of this, because people will. It's more important that people go through the exercises of that they want to try, including translation. It's more important that they um, because we don't want to give the impression that people need to make something that's perfect. I've lauded your translations as perfect, and I don't know if it's hyperbole or not. For me, they're perfect because I don't want them to be anyway. But they're really, really good. They're extremely good, and most people can recognize that right away. Um, but on the same side, I don't want people to feel like they shouldn't attempt to achieve what you and I have achieved as being fluent Latin speakers, because people should try. And that's because that's part of also the classicist idea that, oh, you can only, that Apuleius isn't good enough. That kind of like, he's a native speaker of Latin and he's good, by the way, that kind of stuff, which is just really silly that people get into. And like, oh, Marshall, oh, he's so, and Juvenal, it's like, what are you talking? Let's see you write something better, I would say.
Well,
But
in this way, you have a partial see. You see partially the language. Apuleius, for example, uses some adjectives like impossibilis.
so does
Mhm.
Quintilian as well.
Yes. So is this language Latin so rigid? No, eh, I find more rigid the Italian language. I have more difficulties with Italian than with Latin. Latin is very large and long and deep as a language. Um, it's not Latin is not Cicero, and even if it was, and even if it were Ovid, it wouldn't be enough. So no, no. From
Yeah,
Ennius until Apuleius, you have to read those authors, and you will feel this language going through your skin,
yeah.
and you will discover how this language not only describes reality, but creates reality, because in some
En
situations.
arche en holokos.
Excuse
In
me.
the beginning was the word.
Yes,
In
yes,
principio erat
as the
verbum.
Egyptians used to say, the Madiwa Nachiru, the God's words, it has the hieroglyphics, pre-existed to the word. It's not the word, it's not the hieroglyphic which depicts the word, but it's the word which is described, and which is a description and depicting of the hieroglyph sign,
Mm,
which is the very word thought by the gods in the act of the creation of the world. But if you make this language, every language, but Latin has a certain strength in this. If you make them flow through your skin, um, you will experience that. You are thinking something in Latin, and you will say, "Oh my God, how can I say this into my native language now?" This is tricky. So
right.
Latin.
Jotin, is this? I actually don't recognize his name, but it's saying how that, yeah, you don't say how old are you as quanto vecchio say to as quanto vecchio. No, you're younger than I am, so
Quanto sei vecchio?
yeah. But how many years do you have? and which is, of course, actually, this is a good point to compare. Uh, it's because the dimension, the linguistic, the phonetic dimension of phonemic vowel length is alien to Italian and English speakers and Germans and the French and Spanish and
No,
so forth.
it's not totally true. It's not totally
Well, I
true.
mean, except for cooperare. We have a
Come?
couple. You have
Cooperare,
cooperare.
but also in some dialects, also in some, for example,
Right.
I told it to you, in Romanesco, we actually have a secondary quantitative
Right. I remember you
quantitative
telling me about this.
distinction.
Yeah.
For example, in Romanesco, if you say da macchina, it's different from if you say da macchina, because da is from and da is of the.
L'ho scritto bene così?
No,
Com'è?
only write
Dimmi le lettere.
a single a with the macron, or da without the space between the first and second a.
Ok. Così?
Yes, yes, like that. Yes, like
Questo
that.
è
So,
dalla macchina. Ma che vuol dire? What does it mean?
da macchina is of the car.
Ah, so della.
Da casa, of
Ah,
the
o
house.
dalla o della? Dalla?
Della.
Della macchina.
So,
Ok, cool.
Marco viene
Yeah, everyone's
da
confirming.
casa. Marco
Yeah.
viene da casa is Mark comes from house.
Mm.
Queste sono le chiavi da casa. Da
Well,
casa,
it figures that
of the house.
Romani would still have some phonemic vowel length. So you have more than we do.
A secondary one,
Right.
secondary phonemic distinction.
Mm.
So da is from, and da is of the, and the same a is to,
Hmm.
two words, and a is to the,
Right.
a casa.
That makes sense. That's fantastic. Well, I wanted to, well, for the majority, even with these occasional exceptions that exist, like German has some
Of
long
course,
vowels too.
what you were saying is correct.
For the, yeah, not like Latin or ancient Greek where it's every other syllable is something that's not predictable, that you have to learn separately due to its length. And hence my preference for writing macrons. Not everybody has to do it. You just speak that way and you don't need to write them. I like to practice by writing them. But what was I going to add? Oh, yeah, like quanti anni hai, and how funny it sounds when an American or a German or a Spaniard, anyone would say, like, I'll use an American accent because I can do that. They would say, instead of quanti anni hai, they'll say, oh, also quanti anni hai. And it's just so funny because if it's not a na, a sound which doesn't exist in English or German or French or Spanish or Portuguese, Russian has it, which is nice, but it doesn't happen often. It's simply not the Italian language. So but it's still, it's very difficult to convey to people. It's like trying to it's not, it's actually, that's cruel. It's like trying to I was gonna say compare it to flat earthers. That's wrong. I can't. It's reductio ad flat eartherum. It's terrible. I shouldn't do that. But just the idea of, like, if you haven't experienced this dimension of language, as I have in, say, Japanese, speaking that way every day with phonemic vowel length, then, or if you haven't simply, as you did, you studied language well enough to understand the importance of phonemic vowel length, then it's really hard to convince people, no, this is really the most critical thing of the sound of the language. And
Yes.
people get obsessed with chena and kena and jamma and gamma and so forth. So it's a shame.
No, this is Kena or Cena, Gemma, Gemma, habere and avere. Well, if you go in Australia and speak English and speak Australian English, well, that is English. It's not another language, and they, of course, pronounce that vowel, that consonant in another way. If you go in if you go to Dublin and they say Dublin, and it's not another language, it's English with the diatopic differences, but uh, they will not say, I don't know, how many years have you.
Right.
They will say Dublin, they will pronounce English in a different way, but it will be English. So if you say cena, or if you say cena, it's they are two diachronic variants of the same language. But if you don't pronounce the mimic vowel length, you are not speaking Latin unless you are speaking ecclesiastic Latin in a truly ecclesiastic context. So when, for example, a pope, a priest, into the ecclesiastic context, they of course
I'm just writing some notes for people.
they of course pronounce Latin without phonemic vowel length, and we could define it as a particular dialect of Latin in which there is no difference in vowel length, and not difference in and there are only 5 vowels and not 7. So something like African Latin, no no phonemic vowel length
Hmm.
and 5 vowels.
Right.
Instead of six.
Exactly.
So
Great example.
ecclesiastic Latin speakers are basically African. And
As Augustinus, he said that they're okay. Let them say awesome if they want to say awesome. You know, that's how he talked about it, didn't he?
so,
In Queen
so I
in
think
Emilio asked, quelle a été votre motivation pour commencer à traduire des chansons en latin? What was your motivation for learning to talk? We did speak about this earlier, but maybe you can say briefly, Stefano.
yes, of course, firstly because it's funny, uh, because I like the way Latin sounds with so I was looking for Latin songs into the internet, and many years ago, and I said to myself, but there should be more Latin songs, and Latin songs with with the meter, with metrics. What a pity that
Mm.
they don't exist. And then I said to myself, wait, uh, perhaps I can write them, and and we can do them, because I have
Mm.
this luck of having Luke as a fantastic Latin speaker, a fantastic
Comités.
speaker, a great interpreter, but a very great interpreter.
Oh,
I
well,
remember, I remember the way he interpreted the first song from the Apokolikontosis Natalikia, which is
quid est?
no, the
Oh,
second
you mean
one,
you mean Jax Lament?
Tati Questus.
Questus Titi Tafi, the
Questus
Jax Lament,
Tati.
yeah.
That
Hmm.
interpretation, that masterful interpretation. So
Uh,
why I have begun to write these songs, to translate these songs. It's funny and it's beautiful, and uh, and it makes so that a large share can know the beauty of Latin metrics, which
mm,
is not so easy to reach for one who doesn't study Latin. Not even one who does study Latin in the schools
yeah.
can truly know the beauty of the Latin metrics.
Mm.
They almost all the time study prosastic texts like Caesar and Cicero.
Well, that's all they're capable. Well,
And
that's
I
not
say
true.
to
I say
myself,
that's all they're
but
capable of.
how?
But those are easier for them, and so they don't want to. It's harder to read. Like, actually, I can agree. I had difficulty really understanding Latin poetry until I could really speak with, and not fluently, just be able to speak a little bit, because then it started to become more normal. And I think that's a reason. If one cannot speak Latin easily, it becomes much harder to do anything in it, especially poetry. And I wanted actually to add my I love Greek poetry too. I love ancient Greek poetry, but I think Latin poetry is superior because of the stress of the difference between the ictus and the that interchange. I
Yeah.
and especially because Latin poetry is meant to be spoken, whereas Greek poetry is actually just the lyrics to songs that we don't have the melodies for the most part, and they're still really magnificent. But the fact, just the way that the best part of Latin are the poems, and what's so great, and I think I said it earlier before, but I really want to say it again. What your translations do, and what our cooperation in making these Latin lyrics available for people to listen, is that it becomes an ovum, an earworm. It gets stuck in people's heads, the Latin version. And then, like me, like I didn't know Lucretius hardly at all when I was first singing this song. And then I go to him later. I'm like, oh, now I feel it better. And I think that's a real gift you can give to people, that they, when listening to these songs, they will be able to interact with the Latin language in a more with the literature and the poetry in the more normal, not moral, normal, no,
This is
with more understanding.
this was the next reason why I began to write this text. Um, Virgil's, Lucretius, Catullus' words are, I was saying it before, they are memes which we can use to express all day life now,
Right.
today, in this age. They describe the world in a way which is effective until now. And if you use their words and put it in that pieces of art which constitute our modern um, artistic landscape, and songs and music and popular songs and popular music are of course part of our artistic popular landscape. You are actually translating not only the songs into Latin, but also the Latin into the songs. So,
Ooh, yeah, because and that's the point too. That poetry is not, as we've said before, poetry is not translatable, technically speaking. So, which is why you and I both regard your work here. This isn't just the meaning of the song in Latin. This is an original composition based on an English language
of
song.
course, you have to well. I try always to be as close as possible, as close as possible to the original text, because in that there is the true play, the true game. The game
Hmm.
is be uh, as close as possible to the original text, but be also elegant.
Hmm.
Um, and don't have a religion of the original text.
That's
The
good.
original text is not a religion, but it's but not even to be discarded. The game is that the game is there.
It's
The game is
balance.
there.
Yeah.
You have to be close to it, but not slave to
Yeah.
it. And then you have to use the authors. For example, well, Saturnia regna ducete. Ducete is, of course,
It's the ablative absolute. And people always have trouble with this. They think,
ducete is
I can't tell you how many people said to me, it's Duke and not Duque. And it's like, it's not the.
oh,
I'm like,
no,
guardate ragazzi, non
no.
c'è il Macron qua. I'm like, look, there's no Macron. It's not the verb.
Well, they are beginners, and it's fair
No, these are,
to.
no, unfortunately, no. I got some from professors too, though. It's because, and it actually that has to do
Oh,
with, yeah, I know.
from professor.
But you're very generous to say, oh, they're just beginners. So some people might, but most people I think recognize it as the ablative absolute. But
Anyway, Duket, but they could see Duquette and Ducas nos. Ducas has the macrons and Duque.
you live in a different world, Stefano.
Anyway,
Vivi in un altro mondo, veramente. Ma sei molto generoso. You're a guide. I wanted to, if you have time, Stefano, I wanted to just go through all the lyrics because they're so great. So, um, uh, uh, Ignobile certe tamen omnia ferte, ea quae cupiam mihi da. Oh wait, I was thinking of something. Just this is more for people who like my performance. When because of course I enjoy singing it, but I also like putting the details in. If you when I, for example, what I do, which is another fun exercise, is to because I can't use any sound effects in the original. I get a instrumental version of a song, but there are no sound effects. So any sound effects you hear, like the sound of the bones clattering, those were some markers I dropped in a Tupperware container. Like when he slaps the bone out of the hyena, out of his mouth, where he's like, also that's me. I'm going. I have to do that, and he goes that, and it's a yeah. So I did that, and
Wow.
I was just thinking here the parere volentes. He grabs the cheek of the hyena, and you can hear it in the original, and so I did a little like that, and you can. So this these little stuff that I remember having a lot of
You
fun
are
doing.
good.
Um, it adds
Uh,
texture. It's not the most important part of the song, but I like it. Um,
no, no, it's important. It's important. I don't know if you do say that, but the devil is in the details.
yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah, and this the what you also gave me a great gift here, and I don't know if it was intentional, but with this translation where he says "imo nequam interficiemus," like no, you fool, we're gonna kill him. But to make the lips matched, I had to do an elision here. And it was a great way in speech, not in song, but in speech to demonstrate imo neque interficiemus and just blend right through, like multuile, which was is fun to do. Let me look at oops, sorry everyone. Let's look
and
at
then,
this.
uh,
Oh yeah. I'm sorry about that, but go ahead.
uh, okay. Bucca, bucca, bucca.
What is that?
Bucca, 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 bucca is a little passage in Petronius' Satyricon when the little kid when Trimalchio's little kid, the little slave of Trimalchio, plays some game to on Trimalchio's back, and he makes like this on Trimalchio's back and says "Bucca, bucca, bucca, quod
Mm,
sunt hic?" So bucca bucca bucca, how many are these?
hmm.
And perhaps the game was to I don't know, guess the number of the fingers with which you were knocking the other ones back or something like that. And bucca 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 seems the closest Latin parallel to la 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 la.
Yeah. Nah, 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 nah.
He is a kid.
Yeah.
He's playing a game, a kid game, and he's making some lallation, which is not so articulated. So this this seemed to me the closest way to Latin, to render Latin in Latin book la 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 of the hyenas. Um,
Mm. And
and
and And then this is one of my favorite lines where me questo te fameique finem faxo. And I remember asking you, and I forgive me for asking, I remember I asked you 2 years ago, did you mean famei and not like famisque about the declension? And you told me.
Yes, this is an archaic form of
Mm,
fames, which follows
hmm.
the fifth declension. But this line is totally scarred because we have here the future imperative estote, which
B,
is
in the future.
a very claim of dictatorship. Which you have to do that now and forever.
Mm,
And the future imperative is the typical mood and tense of the 12 tables of the very first law of Rome.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, the 12 tablets, absolutely.
Si vocat ito, ni it antestamino, igitur en capito.
Yeah.
This is the Latin of the 12 tables, and
Mhm.
every time a Roman speaker, a Latin speaker wants to be you have in mind Gandalf, I think it was Gandalf, you shall not pass.
Yes.
This is
You shall not pass. Yeah,
yes, yes.
absolutely.
This is the
Mm.
our future imperative is the shall or shall not of the English speakers.
Mhm.
It's a very strong commandment. So
Yeah.
amico e fine faxo. Ovid
Mm.
makes Juno saying
Mhm.
falleream faxo.
Mhm.
Faxo is fecero, is um, futurum,
I will have done.
futurum
I shall
preteritum
have done.
of the verb
Yeah.
facio, I
Mhm.
make.
Yeah.
Faxo is I will do. But in just plain classical Latin, we would say faciam.
Yeah.
Faxo is a sigmatic future, a relic of an ancient sigmatic future, which is found only, to the best of my knowledge, only in poetic Latin, and Ovid does use it in Juno's words against Europe, if I don't
Mhm.
remember mistake.
Yeah.
Fallere eam faxo. I will
Mm.
make so that she gets in trouble.
Mm.
Um, and then the heinous euge sophos, io triumphe.
Y
This is
and you were telling me something that, and evil, now they're Greek in origin, but you were telling me that these are typical of the plebs, right? These
yes,
words?
euge sophos. There is this beautiful verse of Perseus Flaccus, I think, or was, I don't remember now.
Oh, well,
Uh,
it's fine.
Euge
We'll find it
sophos
later.
effecte praviter quito nequiter euge beate.
Mhm.
There is this verse. um, I will look it for you now. I want to
Oh, let's, troviamonos dopo. Let's find it later, just
euge
we can link it in the description. Oh, you'll find it now. Bye. That's fine.
effecte graviter
Oh,
quito
you got it.
nequiter euge beate. Uh,
Ah.
It's Martial. It's Martial.
Oh, it's Marshall, yeah, of
Yes,
course.
yes. So,
Yeah.
mm, and he describes the way a poet seeks the approval of the public, of the share, of the
Mhm.
corona, as you will say in Latin.
Right.
Sopos and euge. As for io triumpe, is simply a Latin way to say. So a Hebrew man would say hallelujah.
Right.
It's jubilation, io
Yeah.
triumph.
Right.
Pos. And we have optimu dies decidua again.
Right.
CBC. Another trait of you see why it's so important to read many authors. It's important to learn the different styles, the different levels of Latin. If you put the conjunction after the pronoun in second position, CBC datur optimu princeps, this is uh, typical of a very high level of Latin. Um, ista cum I'm making it up now. Cum aec tibi dixero,
Mhm.
sed melius ecum tibi dixero.
Mhm.
The conjunction tends to be in second position in if the level, if the diaphasic level of the language is high. So
Mm.
CBC datur optimu princeps, quis enim quidalit cupiat. CBC dabit optima princeps, quis enim quid ein videat. Then it's not the first time that Scar, who is so intelligent and well educated and sophistic, makes this kind of parallelismi membrorum. What is a parallelismus membrorum? It's when you use the same scheme but with different words, or with the same words in a different case or ending. So a polyptotus, the same verb, datur dabit, optimus optima, CBC. This is a parallelismus membrorum, which is a rhetorical instrument, a rhetorical tool, a weapon for the rhetor. You make the person who listens to you think that your thinking way is perfectly symmetrical and squared. So he or she has absolutely to obey to you.
Yeah.
Scar is very good at it.
Well, and so, and look,
Miriam,
hey everybody, look how I know this I get to make you embarrassed by saying, but look everybody, look how great Stefano is, that not only is he a master of the poetry, but also of rhetoric, of a prose form, and is able to insert that into the poetry in this scheme, which very rarely seen in actual Roman poetry even. So that's, whew, I think that's really cool.
so there is Cicero who says that rhetoric and poetry are two things very different from one another, and nec quicquam inimicius quam illa versibus. So the rhetoric is the greatest enemy of the verses, but it's not true, and it's not what Cicero means in this case to totally separate the two fields. Cicero simply says you have not to put entire verses into an oration.
Well, it's bad for the rhythm, which, again, for people who don't know, that Cicero and all rhetoricians, all orators, writes even their letters, even like Sallustius, writes with close attention to syllable length to give the prose a meter that's different from poetry.
Yes, when Cicero says that rhetoric and poetry are very different from one another, he does not say that it's not numerosa oratio.
Right.
The discourse, the oration is not without meter. It's another meter. It's like
Right.
lyric metrics, which is that one we spoke about, and the recitative metrics, and then there is the rhetoric metrics, which is something Egyptologists, if there are some of my colleagues here listening to us, they are very familiar with this, because the orational style postulated by the great Egyptologist Miriam Lichtheim is one of the main tools of the Egyptian literary tradition. You have the poems, you have the prose, and then you have the orational style, so called by Miriam Lichtheim. Latin poetry is actually in that which an Egyptologist would call orational style. There is a rhythm in the words, and there is also a rhythm in the thinking, that which Germans call Gedankenreim, which is a very beautiful word, Gedankenreim, a rhyme of thoughts. And look at, if you can, a little scroll
Supra?
up, if you can
Diorsum?
if you go back,
Sì? Comodo. Quarsum.
as before.
Sup-
Go
in
back
parte
to
superiore and inferiore paginae.
CBC datur optimo.
Adesso
Descende Paulum. Descende
Descende.
Paulum. Ostende stropas duas integras.
Haec,
Totas.
haec.
Askende
Hi, Kine.
autum. Askende ad CBC da
Askenderidi. Si, Kine. Kobodo.
Sic. Askende magis.
Magis.
Sta. Bene. CBC datur, CBC dabit, optimo princeps, optima princeps, and then licet accipiam mihi plura, mereas modo plurima do. This kind of parallels are frequent in scarce character, in scarce way of thinking. He's actually a sophist. Is sophistes.
Yeah.
Licet accipiam mihi plura, mereas modo plurima do. This is Marshall when he says, there is this beautiful poem of Marshall, donavi tameninquis amico milia quinque, et lotot multum terve quaterve togam. Quid quod
Mhm.
nihilunquam pyladi donavit Orestes, qui donat quamvis plurima, plura negat. So there is this man who says, "Oh, but I gave a lot of gifts to this friend of mine. I am like Pylades for Orestes, or vice versa." And Marshall says to him this very beautiful thing. Look, that Pylades never gave gifts to Orestes or vice versa, because the one who gives gifts, if he gives if he gives a lot of things, there are more things that he won't give. So the gift is like a debt, and if you give a gift, it's like to say, all often, not always, often, it's like to say, okay, I gave to you, I don't have to give you anymore, I gave. For some people, the gift is like the payment of a debt. So
Mhm.
Marshall says, qui donat, quam vis donat plurima, plura negat.
Mhm.
So this earworm, this poetic earworm, was spinning around my head when
Mhm.
I was translating. So you have to read a lot of authors if you want to write Latin verse, because their words must be your earworms. They
Yeah.
must spin around your head when you are writing.
Idiom. Yeah.
It's
Yeah, the
like
very idiom.
hmm?
The meme and meme. Oh, I wanted to mention this too. People don't realize that meme is actually a very ancient word. Mimema in Greek means
Mimema.
it's an imitation,
Yes,
and
mimema. They
and
are memes.
before the modern era, before this century, meme would be used, and it would mean something like, in for example, "Selva Oscura" in Italian, that's a meme, or "Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo?" Or "A rose by any name" would be, I messed it up now, but or "To be or not to be." These are all memes from Shakespeare or from Dante or from literature. So those are memes from literature.
Yes, poets basically create memes, and because they create language, a poet does not simply use a language to communicate. A poet creates the language, not the single words, even if, of course, the great poets create words. Everyone in Italy knows Dante's "Inviarsi" to become a god. Inviarsi
That's beautiful.
parasynthetic is a parasynthetic
It's like apotheosis.
go into God. Go into,
Apotheosis.
hmm?
Apotheosis. It's like
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So yes, you have to read these authors because you have to learn their memes and to express your reality with their words, with their images. Not because you have to imitate some other people and to lose your creativity. No, this is something which enhances your creativity. This is something which increases your creativity.
Mhm.
You can't actually create if you have not grammar of creation and the vocabulary of creation. Creation is at all levels. Well, this is just a game. We I translate these songs. I have fun. It's nothing but creation from the very lowest level, from the game, from the fun, to the highest creation. It's actually language. It's a form of language, and like in every form of language, you have to have a vocabulary. um, Sine fine potestas. Sine fine
Mm.
you scrolled the
Sorry,
text.
yes, go there. It is.
The imperium sine fine dedi. These are the words which Jupiter says of Romans, um, saying that I have given to them imperium sine fine, an endless empire, not simply endless in the sense of in a geographical sense, because they, of course, they know that there are not only Romans, there are the parts, there are other peoples which are not in our empire, and they, of course, did know that. uh, Sine fine, well, finis in Latin is not only end but also limit, limit in all senses.
Limitless
So the
power.
Roman Empire is limitless more
Yeah.
than endless, because
And
it
mhm.
lives in all the dimensions, in the chronological one, in the cultural one, in the geographical one, of course, at Virgil's times.
Mhm.
Mm,
And this has worked so well too for the movie, because in in the movie in the beginning, Mufasa takes Simba when he's a baby, when he's a cub, and shows him these are everything the light touches is the finis, is the border, but you can't go into the shadowy area, into the elephant graveyard. That's the finis, that's the border of our lands. And Scar lives. He does not only he actually lives
yes,
in Pride Rock,
yes,
but he crosses that finis all the time, and he hangs out with the hyenas, and he's in the elephant graveyard when he's singing this. So
oh,
literally from the other side of the limes, of the finis, he's crossing. And also in the same place where Mufasa tells Simba that there is a circle of life, there is a balance between, we don't go and eat all of the gazelle, we have to parkere, we have to leave some of them to live, so that there is a cycle. And then when we die, our bodies become the herba, they become the grass, and then the gazelle, the antelope, they eat the grass. So that's the point that Mufasa said is trying to tell Simba, is that potestas, our importance, our power, is by definition limited, and we have to respect that balance. Where Scar, almost like cancer, actually, which also keeps reproducing and doesn't stop inside an animal's body, that it just like that, and and in that same moment, Scar is being pushed up by the rocks when he's saying "Dabitur maestas sine fine potestas,"
yes,
and it's just like this. And it's also a really creepy growth of rock. It shouldn't do that. Rock shouldn't grow like that. Just like something malignant and evil. And it's just, and so, and what does he say on the original? He doesn't say that. What does he say? It says um, it says, I know it sounds sordid, but you'll be rewarded. This is why I think, in so many ways, you've taken the material and elevated it not just into the Latin language, but into a place of higher literature than the original lyrics, by and even better complementing the movie.
uh-huh.
So
But
yeah, I
well,
always thought that. Isn't that?
it's a good example of hubris of the
Yeah,
classic.
yeah.
Merito vete, iam dabitur. Iam dabitur is something reminiscent of Perseus Flaccus when he describes a man who does sacrifices to the gods in order to have a better field, and to have this better field, he kills his
Mhm.
calves and sacrifices to the gods.
Right.
And says to him, but
Okay.
how the hell you think to be able to have a better field, a better farm, if you kill all your calves to have it from the gods? And he imitates this man who says, Yam Dabidur, he
Right.
certain mi est rogandum deus carminis metrica, nisi dettagliato sit. Non è dettagliato, minime dettagliato est. Scritto est in commentario in esse Ionicos a minore. Ego vero Ionicos non vidi, tantana prestos. Ubina Ionici. I don't remember now. Honestly, can we take back the
In the
poem?
comments, if Marina, write that. Scribe quae etiam in commentaris, postquam haec ipsa pellicula edita erit. Tunc et Stepanos et ego respondebimus tibi cum well, I'm sorry. I'm speaking you in Latin for some reason, because you're a Latin speaker. Because we'll answer properly later. Yeah.
Can we take back the final part of the poem?
Mm-hmm.
Ionicus, Paulo Superius. Per tempora duro. Per tempora is an Ionic est pes est Ionicus a minore. Is a Ionicus a minore fit. Per tempora tam tam tatam. Enduro is a spondi.
Cool.
This is an example of Ionicus a minore in this song. Paulo Loque Superius. Come back to the beginning. Come back to the beginning of the song. To the beginning. Descend a little. Descend. Bis non rediturum. This is another Ionic. Sperate futurum. So when he says ta 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 ta, when he says in this part sperate futurum bis non rediturum, so ta 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 ta, these are Ionic, these are pedes Ionici a maiore.
There you go.
So, well, you could interpret them as anapest, so spera, te futu, but then you will have an Ionicus a minore. So in the first case you have a maiore, sperate fu, and then spondi, turum. Or if you prefer, you can have an anapest, spera, and then te futurum, and in this case is an Ionicus per tempora duro. Yes, sperate futurum bis non rediturum, per tempora duro. You can parse it in either one or the other way. So an Ionic. Thank you anyway, Musa Pedestris Marina Mea, pro a questione tam tecnica. Adoro technicas res. Sperate futurum. So Ionicus a maiore and spondi. Or if you prefer, yes, or if you prefer, an anapest resolved as a spondi, so spera bis non, and then Ionicus a minore, te futurum, rediturum. So these are ecco qua questi tecnica d'oro, schio. So these are the Ionici pedes a maiore, well, a minore, carmine in this song.
It's amazing.
There had been another listener who wrote something
Oh,
to.
yes, I put up what our friend here, Sebastian, wrote about a piece from Exodus. I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I will draw my sword in hand, and my hand shall destroy them. Yeah, thank you, Sebastian. Yeah, they're very yeah, memes meaning yeah, our idea of what a meme is as a visual thing is a that's a new version of it. Stefano, I'd say if you have any other things to say about this song, what we should do, and if everybody out there wants, leave lots of comments and share this video. If you want to see Stefano and me talk about all of the other songs he's translated, so please, of course, give the video a like. You probably have done
Oh,
that already,
it's a pleasure.
and share it and subscribe to Stefano's channel. He has a few really great recordings. I wish you would do more, but we're going to get him a microphone. Thank you, everybody. You told us, everybody, today in the comments, Stefano's mic is low. Mine is relatively high. We're sorry for the imbalance, and we'll see if we can fix that for next time, because we want you
I
to
will get I will
hear.
get a microphone. I will get a microphone. I promise it. I swear.
Okay, we'll help you. Don't worry. We'll help. Maybe you'll have a fan out there who wants to get one for you.
I just need I just need to, a little of time to go to buy it, because
Absolutely.
I swear we have microphones in my city.
We,
We have
you,
we
oh,
have them.
sure. I mean, you live in Lazio,
I'll
so
buy it. I
Caput
have been
Mundi,
promised so much
Caput
since.
Mundi, praeditum microphonis, plane.
No,
Uh,
our little, no, no, not
oh, you're
Roma.
close enough to Rome. You're
My little beloved Latina.
well, ultima verba super hoc
Ultima
carmine.
roba, Deo Carmine. For me, as I already said, for me it's a very sweet memory, because it's the beginning of all this, and as a last word of this song, um, it's a little underrated. I see that Mundus Pateat had a lot of share,
Yeah,
and I was
went viral.
very happy of this. But
Yes, yes, everyone,
why?
the songs that Stefano and I have done together should get more views. So the only that happens, of course, from you watching them, but sharing them with other people, and eventually YouTube will be like, maybe other people will like them. So
Yes,
Stefano really feels as I do that these videos should be seen um, more by people, because we think it will
exactly.
inspire people to learn the language.
2 hours, two very pleasurable hours with you, with all of you, and with the Luke. Why did you lose the pronoun and with the, with you and with the, and
Oh,
with
because
Luke?
oh, with the singular you. Are you
The
asking
singular, yeah,
actually why we lost it? I could tell you. Come mai
the.
non diciamo, why don't we say thou and thee anymore? The reason is this. It's actually the same reason that Brazilian Portuguese uses você, or você rather,
Yes,
instead of
I
yeah,
know. You basically, voi date del voi a tutti. You basically,
esatto.
you, vossia, la signoria vostra, to everyone.
Yep.
To
It
everyone.
went.
Yeah,
It probably.
I know.
I believe it started when the British parents were telling. Of course, they were British. British parents were educating their children to be polite to people, but to say you. And as soon as and so the children would say you to the parents. That was the first change. But maybe the parent would say thou, child, and then you, father. And then eventually, once the parents started saying it to the children, their own children, that's when it died. That's when thou and thee died.
Ah,
There are some dialects in England which still have it, but it doesn't conjugate like thou shalt or thou dost. Doesn't. They
ah.
use a different. It's actually like
So,
a little bit like
now,
the vos in, I think, Argentinian or Chilean, where they use vos in Spanish dialect in South America, um, where they say vos, but then the conjugated form isn't vosotros, it's the tú form, I think, or it's the usted form. I don't remember. Someone else. Chris is here. Pernox. Dic nobis. ¿Cómo se dice en español? ¿Cómo se usa el vos? But anyway, it gets mixed up. So it's not like the true thou, which still, it hasn't really survived. But, Magister Green inquit. Ego omnia haec carmina discipulis meis demonstravit illis per placent. Thank you.
Revera.
I'm glad you like all the
Mi
songs.
pulcherrimum advers, amiche. Pulcherrimum advers, amiche.
Ooh.
Et si canunt, et si placet, mi maximus praemium.
And
Chapas.
apparently it's there, and here it says that como estás vos. So vos is just in the place of tu. The conjugation is the same. So it's almost an inversion of what happens in some other places. But imponamus finem huic colloquio carissime amiche, quid putas.
Gratias vobis omnibus audientibus et audientibus verba nostra et carmina nostra et uspero compartientibus.
Gratias summa sagimus procerto. We're so glad to be able to make these songs together in translation and performance in order to share them with our love of these things with all of you. So thanks, everyone. Stefano will be back in a future colloquium. So we'll see you then.
If you want, ubi vos Gai ego Gaius. If you want, I want.
That's right.
I hope I was not boring, or I don't know.
No. Luis Almeida said it was an amazing live stream. So gracias, Luis.
Thanks.
Glad that you liked it. Thanks so much. We look forward to if you have scribite comentarios vuestros in commentari si habetis. If you have other things we didn't get to, just write in the comments and we'll answer. So we'll see ya. Volete.